Hi, this is John Linneball, and this is AP US History Video 18, The Roots of Colonial Resistance to British Control. This is my website, www.johnlinneballtutoring.com. You can reach me at john@johnlinneball.com. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. If you don't like ads, try my locals.com site, testpreparation.locals.com. All right, let's get on with the show. The roots of colonial resistance to British control. Tensions further increased between Britain and its American colonies in the first half of the 1700s. Britain attempted to increase its control while the colonies were accustomed to the salutary neglect, which I've discussed in previous videos, where basically they were left alone and the colonies prospered. Some colonists were firmly loyal to Britain. Others, who were influenced by Enlightenment ideas, wanted independence, so free trade, religious freedom, local self-government, etc. Many of those who wished to escape British control believed that the British colonial system was corrupt. The opposition to British rule was based on Enlightenment thinking. So the justification for imperialism and monarchies in general was from Hobbes, a philosopher who wrote a book called Leviathan, in which he explained people are nasty and brutish and they must be controlled by a strong leader to avoid chaos and anarchy in the bad sense of the word, where if nobody rules, we can't have a society, nobody will be able to behave themselves, we'll all live like cave people, and that's probably even an insult to cave people. John Locke was the Enlightenment thinker widely read in the colonies, who stated that all people are entitled to life, liberty, and property, and the function of government is to protect those rights. So he was much more optimistic than Hobbes about people's ability to govern themselves. Said, well, we don't exist under government, government exists under us. Government is somebody that we have to take care of us. We're not there to take care of the government. We're not there to be the government's slave. The government is supposed to be our servant, which is why many modern day officials are known as public servants or civil servants, etc. Locke's ideas would be important in the American Revolution, and the life, liberty, and property statement became life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, most likely because the people writing the Declaration of Independence didn't want people to think, oh, well, okay, if we all have a right to property, then why don't you, wealthy landowners, give us some property? Certainly wouldn't want that. So let's move on. The Country Party versus the Court Party. Colonial resistors to British rule also gained inspiration from an unexpected source: British writers. Many reform-minded and or radical British believed that the British system was corrupt, wasteful, tyrannical, etc., much like many modern-day Americas feel that about the current American government, that it's corrupt, wasteful, tyrannical, etc. So it's not that ironic that British writers themselves would be among the biggest critics of the British system, because many Americans are the biggest critics of the American system today. These writers and reformers were called the Country Party because they believed themselves to represent the whole country, Great Britain or the UK, the United Kingdom. The opposite party was called the Court Party by critics who believed the opposite party favored the inner circle of those in power, which would be called the court. That's a normal term for royals and their officials and other favorites. The king's court, the queen's court. The idea a monarch has officials who are very close and other people who exist in that court for whatever reason, and those are the insiders. You can look at that today in American government. People like to talk about, oh, I want to vote for this candidate because he or she is not a Beltway insider. The Beltway is a highway that goes around Washington, D.C., so if you're inside the Beltway, you're probably somebody who's in quotes, the court of whoever is president, etc., or Congress or whatever. You're an insider and a career politician, and that's supposed to make you bad. I take some issue with that, but anyway, if that helps you comparing today's political system to the 1700s British system, I hope it does. Great. If it helps you, great. If not, okay, sorry to digress, but hopefully that helped you. The Country Party criticized Prime Minister Robert Walpole, and here's a picture of Prime Minister Walpole here, for gathering wealth and power for himself at the expense of Parliament. Country Party people were also known as Walpole men for that reason. CP members, that is Country Party members, also accused Walpole and others of unbalancing the constitutional powers in Britain and endangering individual liberties. Colonial reformers, radicals, and rebels used the same line of thought, accusing the British of limiting liberties, being corrupt, wasteful, and tyrannical, etc. So you've probably seen people in the United States who express very similar ideas about American government. So that's where this comes from. Cato's letters. One country party essayist popular among American colonists was Cato. Cato was the pseudonym of John Trenchard and Thomas Gordon, so two writers who wrote together. The original Cato was a political enemy of Julius Caesar who defended Republican values. Cato's letters were published by English newspapers from between 1720 and 1723 and reprinted in colonial newspapers. The letters were published in book form as the book Essays on Liberty, Civil and Religious. They decried corruption in British government and warned against tyranny and were often cited by the rebels in the American Revolution. So here's a bust of the original Cato from the Roman Empire, and here are a couple little excerpts from the Cato's letters. So, this great nation, undone by despicable stock jobbers and their abettors, has hitherto quietly groaned under the merciless hands of its pillagers, and lived for some months upon the hopes of redress. We look towards a parliament, his majesty and ministry being absent, and buffeted with the affairs of this kingdom abroad. And so, does that sound a bit like what's going on in this country today and what people are writing today? It should. And we see, as I've heard with concern, the report of our being in danger of losing Gibraltar lately revived. I had no small pleasure to see in the general of the people a just sense of the great importance of that place to the trade and security of England. All men in truth knew their opinion of it and fears that, So these are letters expressing ideas about foreign and domestic policy, and hey, how come the government isn't stopping these bad guys, these fat cats, from taking over, the stock jobbers and their abettors. Anyway, that should remind you of some things you see online and in the newspaper and on TV and other places today. Legal procedures in America. In the 1700s, the American colonies developed legal systems that were significantly different from the British legal system. This is because British trained lawyers were hard to come by, since most lawyers already had good jobs in Britain, so why would they come to the American colonies? And colonial conditions made different rules make sense. So the idea was, for example, labor shortages made imprisonment a bad idea. If you already don't have enough people to plant and farm and work at whatever industries you have, you don't want to put people who can work behind bars, and then where they become a liability rather than an asset, a cost rather than a profit center. So other punishments such as branding, whipping, public shaming, remember the Puritans, etc., putting people in stocks, those were used so convicts could still work. Also, procedures were simplified and streamlined for similar reasons. Since there weren't many lawyers, there also weren't many judges, and obviously there weren't many court resources, so lengthy trials wouldn't do. Probably a lot of these people had other jobs besides being lawyers and judges and things like that. Not 100% sure, but anyway, definitely they didn't have enough resources to have this huge full-time court system, so you could see why these things would be simplified and streamlined. Redefinition of libel enables a free press. Under British law of the time, any criticism of a public official could be libel, so it was a big risk to criticize the government. So, colonial courts found that publishers were not liable for libel. Say that 5 times fast. Liable for libel, liable for libel, liable for libel. As long as the information was true. John Peter Zenger, a New York City news publisher, was arrested and tried for seditious. In case you don't know what seditious means, tending to incite rebellion, treasonous, the idea you're encouraging other people to rebel against the government. Libel in 1735. Zenger's attorney successfully argued that libel cannot be found where the statements were true. The jury acquitted him, and publishers were much more willing to publish truthful criticism of the government. Once they realized they weren't going to be tried for seditious libel and put in prison or whatever, I don't know, maybe you could be executed for that, because it seems like it's kind of the next thing over to treason, which they definitely could execute you for. So that would definitely encourage people to actually go and publish things that criticize the government once they realized they couldn't get in criminal trouble for it. And here's a little plaque. The renowned champion of the freedom of the press spent his first days in America on Governor's Island. As a 13-year-old boy, he arrived in New York in 1710 with thousands of refugees from the Palatinate who were quartered for a time on this island. In 1735, as the publisher of the New York Weekly Journal. He won an acquittal of libel charges in the historic court trial, which marked the first major contribution to the cause of freedom of the press in America. We can see this was erected by the 1st United States Army, 14 October 1963. All right, so let's move on. Democracy in colonial America. Some point to these times as evidence of democracy in America. Well, you had a growing freedom of the press, you had the ideas of John Locke, life, liberty, and property, but there were still plenty of non-democratic forces at work. So there was still theocracy in many colonies, and there was still slavery, etc. So at best, and probably most accurately, these days were the beginnings of democracy in America, which makes sense. This is an evolutionary process, as much more than it was a revolutionary process. Mostly a lot of small, peaceful changes. Yes, there was a revolution, but mostly this was like, well, okay, we should have democracy here, and Well, if we have democracy here, why don't we have democracy in this other place? And pretty soon you have democracy every place where it belongs. All right, let's move on. Did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything, and you'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? Well, it's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours. That's 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I also don't have 1,000 subscribers at this time. Would you like to see these videos without ads? Why not try joining my community at testpreparation.locals.com. And for the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I'm also happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos.
I'd appreciate your input.
I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls, or things that are off topic, spammers, disturbed people, whatever the heck, somebody wants to post things that are just off topic. You can hire me for tutoring. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Certainly, with social distancing, etc., we can figure out a way to do it live, or we can do it on Zoom. And if we do it on Zoom, then I can tutor you no matter where you are, as long as you have access to a computer and high-speed internet. Thanks for watching. If you want my contact information, stay tuned, and also stay tuned for an important notice. Facebook, I'm at www.facebook.com/Linnebaal Tutoring, all one word. Instagram, www.instagram.com, john.linnebaal.tutoring. Phone number is 415-623-4251. Email is john@johnlinnebaal.com. Website is www.johnlinnebaal.com or www.johnlinnebaaltutoring.com. Testpreparation.locals.com. That's my locals.com site. Why not check that out? There's a small subscription fee. Well, actually, it's just an access fee one time. It's $10. Can't beat that. And mail, John Linnebaal Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. Note, this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on the Barron's AP United States History Review book, a little bit on the Princeton Review cracking the AP US History exam, 2019 edition, and any other sources listed in the video description, and my general knowledge of U.S. history. While this should help you to do well on the AP U.S. history exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and asks you about in his or her own tests, homework, etc. Please read your class text and pay attention to what your teacher says in class. All right, hope you are having a good day. Talk to you later.